My name is Keisha, and yesterday I lowered my 10-year-old son's casket into the wet Georgia clay while my parents posted a selfie drinking $300 champagne on a yacht in Cabo. The caption read, "Fresh starts." They thought they were celebrating a vacation away from my tragedy. They did not know they were actually celebrating the beginning of their total financial ruin. Before I tell you how I seized their assets and left them homeless in less than a week, please, like this video and subscribe. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you, this story is for you. The rain in Atlanta does not wash things clean. It just turns everything to red mud. I stood there clutching a soaking wet handful of white roses. My son Leo, 10 years old. A congenital heart defect took him from me in his sleep. It was quiet. Too quiet. Beside me stood James, my attorney, and two colleagues from my forensic accounting firm. That was it. 4 people. I looked at the empty row of chairs set up for immediate family. 6 empty folding chairs. My father Otis, my mother Lucille, my younger sister Tasha, and her husband Brad. They promised they would be here. They told me their flight from Chicago was delayed due to storms. They told me to go ahead with the service, and they would rush there straight from the airport. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe that my family would not abandon me on the worst day of my life. The priest was finishing his prayer. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I stepped forward to place the roses on the wood. My hands were shaking so hard the thorns pricked my skin, but I did not feel the pain. I only felt the hollow freezing wind blowing through my black coat. Then my phone buzzed against my hip. It buzzed again, and again. A relentless vibration that broke the sacred silence of the cemetery. I pulled it out intending to turn it off. Maybe it was them. Maybe they were lost at the airport, but it was not a text. It was an Instagram notification. Tasha Glams is live now. My thumb hovered over the screen. A sick feeling heavier than grief settled in my stomach. I clicked the notification. The screen was bright, blindingly bright compared to the gray sky above me. The video loaded. Sunshine, blue water, music thumping in the background. And there they were. Tasha wearing a white designer bikini holding a glass of amber liquid. Brad shirtless and laughing steering a boat. And behind them lounging on white leather seats were my parents. My mother Lucille was wearing an oversized sun hat and laughing at something Brad said. I turned the volume up. Tasha's voice screeched through the speaker. "Hey guys, just wanted to update you on our healing journey. We had to get away from the negativity. Sometimes you just have to choose joy, right? Here's to new beginnings." She panned the camera to my mother. My mother raised her glass and shouted, "To the future!" The caption on the screen read, "Healing Trip. Goodbye, bad vibes." I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees buckled. "James." My lawyer grabbed my elbow to steady me. "Keisha," he whispered. "What is it?" I could not speak. I stared at the timestamp. Live. This was happening right now. While dirt was being shoveled onto my son's grave, my mother was toasting to the future. I did not think. The rage rose up in me like a tidal wave drowning out the sorrow. I pressed the call button for my mother. On the screen, I watched the live stream pause as her phone rang. I saw her look at the screen, roll her eyes, and say something to Tasha. Then she answered. "Keisha." Her voice was loud, competing with the wind and the music. "Why are you calling right now? You know international roaming charges are expensive." "Where are you?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, scraped raw. "I am standing at Leo's grave." "Mom, the service just finished." "Where are you?" There was a pause. I heard ice clinking in a glass. "Oh, honey, stop being so dramatic," she said, her words slightly slurred. "We couldn't make it. You know how sensitive Tasha is. Seeing a coffin would just trigger her anxiety. We needed to heal Keisha. Leo is gone. Crying in the rain won't bring him back. We are doing a celebration of life in our own way." "A celebration of life," I screamed, startling the priest. You are on a yacht in Cabo. You lied to me about the flight. Lower your voice, my mother snapped. You are embarrassing yourself. We are family. We grieve differently. Besides, Brad found a great investment opportunity for that inheritance money you are sitting on. We need to talk business when we get back next week. We are going to need a check to secure Tasha's future. It is what Leo would have wanted. Business. That was all Leo was to them. A payday. A way to fund Tasha's influencer delusions and Brad's failed real estate schemes. Mom, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You are right. We need to talk business. I hung up. I looked at the phone. Tasha was back on the screen, blowing a kiss to her followers. I looked at the tombstone. Beloved son. I raised my arm and smashed the phone onto the wet pavement. It shattered into pieces, silencing Tasha's laughter. James looked at me, concerned. Keisha, are you okay? I wiped the rain from my face. I looked at the shattered phone, then back at James. I am fine, James. But they won't be. They want to talk business. Fine. I am going to the office. I need you to pull every financial record my sister and Brad have ever generated. James straightened up. His eyes narrowed. What are you looking for? I smoothed my coat. I am a forensic accountant, James. I find money that people try to hide, and I have a feeling my brother-in-law didn't pay for that yacht with his own money. I am not just going to cut them off, I am going to bury them. The silence of the house was my only comfort. It was the third day since the funeral, and I sat on the floor of Leo's bedroom pressing his favorite dinosaur pillow against my face. It still smelled like him, a mix of grass stains and the peppermint soap he insisted on using. I was trying to memorize that scent before it faded forever. I had not showered. I had not eaten. I simply existed in the vacuum he left behind. Then the silence shattered. A loud mechanical beeping noise pierced the air, followed by the screech of heavy brakes. I frowned, wiping my swollen eyes. I was not expecting a delivery. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. A massive moving truck was backing into my driveway, its rear tires crushing the hydrangea bushes I had planted with Leo last spring. The branches snapped under the weight, and I felt a surge of confusion mixed with anger. Before I could even process what was happening or find my shoes, my front door burst open. I had forgotten that my mother still had the emergency key from 3 years ago when she watered my plants. I ran downstairs barefoot. The foyer was absolute chaos. 2 burly movers were wrestling a gaudy leopard print sofa through the door. Directing them like a general on a battlefield was Brad. He was wearing a tight polo shirt and sunglasses indoors, looking ridiculous and entirely too comfortable. Careful with the leather, guys, Brad shouted, ignoring me completely as I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. That is Italian import. Do not scratch the frame. Brad, I said, my voice trembling. What is going on? Why is there a truck in my driveway? My father, Otis, walked in behind him, carrying a suitcase and a garment bag. He looked around my living room with a critical eye. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He just nodded at the movers and pointed to the center of the room. Put it over there, he commanded. Then he finally turned to me. Keisha, you look terrible. Look at this place. It is dark. It is depressing. It is a good thing we came when we did. What do you mean you came when you did? I asked, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. Why are you bringing furniture into my house? My father sighed as if explaining something simple to a slow child. We are not just bringing furniture, Keisha. We are moving in. We are here to save you. This house is too big for one person, especially a woman in your fragile state. You will get depressed alone. You might do something stupid. Your mother and I, along with Tasha and Brad, have decided to make the sacrifice. We are going to live here to take care of you. We sold the condo this morning. It is a done deal. I stared at him. Sacrifice? They sold their condo. That was the code. They were broke. They had sold their home probably to pay off debts, and now they were invading mine under the guise of charity. Before I could scream, Tasha walked in. She was holding an iced coffee and scrolling on her phone. She looked up, scanned the living room, and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "We are going to need to repaint immediately," she announced without even looking at me. "This gray is so depressing. It ruins the vibe." She brushed past me and started walking up the stairs, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. "Where are you going?" I demanded, chasing after her. "I want to check out the rooms," she called back over her shoulder. "I need the one with the best natural light for my content creation. The basement is too dark." My stomach dropped. I knew which room had the best light. It was the room facing the morning sun. "No," I whispered. I ran up the stairs, but Tasha was faster. She pushed open the door to Leo's room. My sanctuary. The place I had been sitting just moments ago. She stood in the doorway, tapping her chin thoughtfully as she surveyed the little bed shaped like a race car, and the shelves lined with Lego sets. "Perfect," she said. "The south-facing window is exactly what I need for my beauty tutorials." She turned to Brad, who had followed us up the stairs, panting slightly. "Babe, get the movers to clear all this junk out first. We can box up the toys and donate them to an orphanage or something. Just get it out of here. I need this space empty by tonight so I can set up my ring light and backdrop." Junk. She called Leo's life junk. She called the Lego sets we spent hours building together junk. She wanted to erase his existence to make room for a ring light. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud explosion. It was a cold, quiet break. It was a physical sensation like a rubber band snapping in the center of my chest. I did not scream. I did not cry. I turned around and walked calmly into my bedroom across the hall. I opened my nightstand drawer. Underneath a stack of books, my hand found the cold, hard plastic of the heavy-duty taser I had bought for self-defense years ago after a break-in down the street. I checked the battery indicator. Full charge. I slipped the safety off. The red light hummed with promise. I gripped it tight, feeling the weight of it in my palm. I walked back into the hall. Tasha was still standing in the doorway of my dead son's room, pointing at his bookshelf and telling Brad which boxes to bring up. I raised the weapon. "Get out," I said. And this time I was not asking. Brad scrambled backward, tripping over a box of Leo's books, his face losing its arrogant smirk for a split second before transforming into a mask of calculated panic. He did not apologize or leave. Instead, he pulled out his phone with the speed of a man who had practiced being a victim his entire life. He dialed 911 and put it on speaker so we could all hear his performance. "I need police at 42 Oakwood Drive immediately," he shouted into the phone, his voice cracking theatrically. "My sister-in-law has a weapon. She is having a psychotic break. She is threatening to kill us. There are children present." There were no children present. The only child who should have been here was in the ground 6 feet under the wet clay of the cemetery. I lowered the taser, but I did not put it away. I simply leaned against the doorframe of my son's room and waited. My mother was clutching her pearls in the hallway, whispering loudly to Tasha about how I had finally snapped, just like she always knew I would. Tasha was already filming again, holding her phone low to capture the drama without being obvious. When the sirens wailed down the street 5 minutes later, Brad rushed to the front door, practically throwing himself into the arms of the arriving officers. I walked down the stairs slowly, still holding the taser at my side, but pointed at the floor. "She is crazy, officer," Brad was saying, pointing a shaking finger back at the house. "She pulled a gun on me. I was just trying to help her move some boxes. She is unstable. You need to arrest her for assault with a deadly weapon." 2 officers stepped into the foyer. The first was a rookie looking nervous. The second was Sergeant Miller. My shoulders relaxed instantly. Sergeant Miller was the lead investigator on a massive embezzlement case I had consulted on last year. We had spent hours going over spreadsheets together. He knew exactly who I was, and more importantly, he knew exactly how sane I was. Brad was still rambling, trying to leverage his tears. "She is dangerous. We are terrified." Sergeant Miller looked at Brad, then he looked at me. He bypassed Brad entirely and walked straight over to me. "Ms. Brooks." Miller said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Is this man bothering you?" Brad stopped mid-sob. His mouth hung open. "Wait," he stammered. "You know her. She is the one with the weapon." I handed the taser to Miller handle first. It is legal and registered, Sergeant. And these people are intruders. They entered my home without permission and began moving their furniture in while throwing my deceased son's belongings into boxes. I asked them to leave. They refused. I defended my property. Miller nodded, handing the taser to the rookie to hold. He turned to Brad, his expression hardening. Sir, do you have a lease agreement? Is your name on the deed to this house? Well, no. Brad stuttered, his face turning a blotchy red. We are family. Her parents are here. We just sold our condo to come help her. We have nowhere else to go. That sounds like a civil matter, Miller said, crossing his arms. But right now the homeowner wants you out. And since you have no legal right to be here, you are trespassing. You have 5 minutes to get your furniture and your family off this property, or I will arrest you for criminal trespassing. Tasha gasped, dropping her phone to her side. You can't do that. We are influencers. I have rights. I already posted the house tour. My followers are expecting a reveal. Miller just pointed at the door. The next 10 minutes were a beautiful, chaotic symphony of humiliation. The movers, who had been standing awkwardly by the truck, had to come back in and haul the leopard print sofa back out under the watchful eye of the police. Brad was frantically whispering to the movers, trying to negotiate a refund, which they clearly denied. Tasha was crying real tears now, not for Leo, but for her ruined content schedule. My father Otis walked past me, dragging his suitcase, his head hung low in shame. He would not look me in the eye. But my mother was different. As the police ushered them toward their luxury SUV, she stopped on the porch. She turned to me, her eyes cold and hard like flint. The mask of the concerned mother was gone, completely replaced by pure venom. You are ungrateful, Keisha, she hissed, so only I could hear. You are sending your own parents to the street. We sold everything to come here. We have nothing. You should have asked me first, I said, my voice steady. We did not think we had to ask, she spat back, stepping closer. That money you are sitting on does not belong to you. It belonged to Leo, and Leo belonged to this family. You think you can hoard $4.5 million while your sister suffers? That is blood money, Keisha, and we are going to get what is ours. She climbed into the car and slammed the door. $4.5 million. It was the first time anyone had said the number out loud. I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear down the street. They did not just want help, they knew the exact amount of the trust fund. They had done their research. They had calculated Leo's death down to the last cent before his body was even cold. I turned back to Sergeant Miller, who was watching me with pity. Do you want us to stay for a bit? Ms. Brooks? He asked. No, thank you, Sergeant, I said, turning back to my empty house. I have some work to do. I walked inside and locked the door. Then I went straight to my office. If they knew the number, 4.5 million, they had seen documents. And if they had seen documents, someone had breached my privacy long before today. The war had started, and I was already behind. The next morning my phone rang again, but this time it was my Aunt Clara. In every dysfunctional family there is always one person whose job is to smooth things over, to tell the victims to swallow their pain so the aggressors do not feel uncomfortable. That was Aunt Clara. She cried into the receiver, telling me that my parents were heartbroken over the misunderstanding at the house. She said they just wanted to clear the air. She begged me to meet them for dinner at the Gilded Fork to make peace. I agreed. But I did not agree because I wanted peace. I agreed because my lawyer James had told me that in order to protect Leo's trust fund completely, I needed proof of their intent. I needed them to say the quiet part out loud. I dressed in a simple black dress, and before I left the house, I slipped a slim digital recorder into the inside pocket of my blazer. I taped the microphone wire discreetly inside my collar. I checked the battery 3 times. If they wanted to talk business, we would talk business. The Gilded Fork was the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where the menus did not have prices and the waiters wore tuxedos. When I arrived, my family was already seated at a prime round table in the center of the room. They looked completely out of place, yet entirely confident. Tasha was wearing a sequined dress that was far too loud for a Tuesday dinner, and Brad was wearing a suit that looked shiny under the chandelier light. I sat down, and the air at the table shifted. My mother gave me a tight, thin smile. "I am glad you came, Keisha," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We need to be a united front right now." I did not smile back. I just placed my purse on the floor, making sure the angle was right for the recorder. The waiter approached, and before I could ask for water, Tasha took charge. "We will start with 2 bottles of the Dom Perignon," she announced loud enough for the next table to hear. "And bring us the Grand Seafood Tower. The one with the lobster tails. Oh, and I will have the Wagyu beef medium rare with extra truffles." She did not look at the menu. She did not ask if anyone else wanted seafood. She just ordered with the reckless abandon of someone who knew they were not paying. Brad ordered a scotch. My parents ordered steaks. I ordered an iced tea. For the first 20 minutes we ate in a tense silence, broken only by the sound of Tasha cracking crab legs and slurping champagne. She posted 3 photos of the food to her story, captioning them, "Family Dinner" and "Blessed." Finally, when the plates were cleared, Brad cleared his throat. He reached under his chair and pulled out a large glossy presentation folder. He placed it in the center of the table, pushing aside the crystal salt shakers. "Keisha, we have been doing a lot of thinking." Brad began, leaning forward with the intensity of a late-night infomercial host. "We know you are hurting, we all are. But Leo would not want us to dwell in sadness. He would want his legacy to mean something. He would want to bring light into the world." He opened the folder. Inside were architectural renderings of a massive glass-walled villa overlooking a beach. It looked like a 5-star resort. At the top, printed in gold letters, were the words, "The Tasha Brooks Holistic Healing Center." I stared at the image. I looked at Tasha, who was beaming. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a vision," Tasha said, clasping her hands together. "I have been so traumatized by Leo's death, Keisha. I realized that my calling is to help others heal. Brad found this property in Malibu. It is perfect. We can buy it with the trust fund money. We will live there, and I will run retreats. I will live stream meditation sessions. It will be a sanctuary." I looked closer at the budget breakdown on the next page. Acquisition cost $3 million. Renovation budget $1 million. Salary for director Tasha, $200,000 a year. "So let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level. "You want to use my dead son's money to buy a beach house in Malibu, where you will live and make videos." "It is not just a beach house," my mother interjected sharply. "It is a business investment, Keisha. Tasha is a brand. This will launch her career into the stratosphere. And it honors Leo. We will put a plaque with his name on the gate. Small font, of course, so it does not ruin the aesthetic. A plaque." They were going to trade my son's life for a plaque on a gate I would never be allowed to walk through. Brad tapped the paper. "The market is hot, Keisha. We need to move the funds by Friday to secure the property. We already put a verbal offer in. We figured since you are the trustee, you can just write the check." I felt the recorder burning against my chest. I had it. I had the proof of their delusion and their greed. I sat back, crossing my arms. "I will think about it." I lied. "Good," my father said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "That is all we ask. Be reasonable." The waiter returned, placing a small black leather folder on the table. The bill. The table went silent. Tasha looked at the ceiling. Brad suddenly found a spot on his fingernail very interesting. My mother adjusted her jewelry. My father reached out, took the folder, and slid it across the white tablecloth until it rested directly in front of me. "You get this, Keisha," he said casually. "Since you are the one sitting on the family fortune, it is the least you can do." I opened the folder. $812. For a dinner where I drank 1 iced tea. I looked at my father. Then I looked at the bill. "The least I can do," I repeated. I reached into my purse. But I did not pull out my credit card. I pulled out a $20 bill and placed it on the table. That covers my tea and the tip, I said, standing up. My mother's jaw dropped. Keisha, you cannot be serious. We do not have that kind of cash on us. Then I guess you better start washing dishes, I said. I walked out of the restaurant, listening to the beautiful sound of their panic rising behind me. I had the recording. Now I just needed to set the trap. My father, Otis, was not a man who liked to be ignored. As I turned to leave, he slammed his hand down on the table, causing the silverware to rattle against the fine china. The sound echoed through the dining room, but he did not care. He was desperate. He signaled for me to sit back down, and for a moment I did, just to hear the depth of their depravity. I needed it all on the record. Otis leaned in, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and entitlement. He looked at me with eyes that used to read me bedtime stories, but now only saw dollar signs. He decided to abandon the pretense of grief and go straight for the logic of a predator. Look, Keisha, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You are being emotional and irrational. We need to look at this practically. Leo was the only grandson, and we loved him, but he is gone. That is the hard truth. He is in the ground, and money is for the living. I stared at him, blinking slowly. Money is for the living. He said it with such conviction as if it were a scripture. According to natural law, Otis continued gaining confidence when I did not immediately interrupt. The assets of the deceased should serve the survival of the tribe. We have worked out the math and it is fair. The trust fund is $4.5 million. Tasha needs $3 million for the startup and the Malibu house because that is the future of this family's name. Your mother and I need $1 million for our retirement since we sacrificed our condo to come here and support you. He paused, taking a sip of water, as if he had just delivered a brilliant business proposal. And you, he said, pointing a calloused finger at me. You keep the remaining $500,000. That is more than enough for a single woman with no dependents. You have a job. You have a house. You do not need the excess. It would just sit there. $500,000. They were offering me roughly 10% of my own son's legacy, as if it were a generous tip for good service. They had carved up his life into slices of pie and awarded themselves the biggest pieces. I felt a cold laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of something breaking forever. I reached into my bag. Tasha's eyes lit up immediately. She sat up straighter, thinking I was reaching for a checkbook or a pen to sign over the rights. The greed on her face was so naked it was almost grotesque. Instead, I pulled out a crumpled piece of paper I had carried with me since the hospital. It was a donation receipt from last year. You talk about natural law, Dad, I said, my voice ice cold, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. You talk about what the money should do. But let me tell you what Leo wanted. I smoothed the paper out on the tablecloth next to the untouched lobster. This is where Leo put his allowance every month, I said. The Marine Life Conservancy. He wanted to save right whales. He cried when he saw them on TV. He told me that when he grew up, he was going to buy a boat and protect them. I looked directly at Tasha, who was looking at the paper with disdain. My son wanted to save whales, Tasha, I said. He did not want to save the failing career of his lazy aunt. He did not want to buy you a glass house so you could pretend to be spiritual on the internet. He wanted to do good. And funding your lifestyle is not doing good. It is feeding a parasite. The word hung in the air. Parasite. Tasha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Brad turned a deep shade of crimson. But it was my mother, Lucille, who reacted. The mask of the grieving grandmother slipped completely. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You selfish, ungrateful little brat!" Then I saw the motion. Her hand grabbed the stem of her large glass of Pinot Noir. In slow motion, I watched the dark red liquid arc through the air. I did not move. I let it hit me. The cold wine splashed across my face and soaked into the front of my white silk blouse. It dripped down my chin, looking like blood. The restaurant went dead silent. Every fork stopped. Every conversation ceased. My mother stood there, chest heaving, the empty glass still in her hand. "You are dead to us," she hissed. "If you do not give us that money, you are no daughter of mine." I wiped the wine from my eyes. I looked at the red stains spreading across my heart. "Good," I said calmly. "I would hate to be related to someone like you." I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them with the bill, the stares of 50 strangers, and a recording that would destroy them in court. I thought walking out of the restaurant would buy me some peace, but I was wrong. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone was vibrating so hard it rattled against the cup holder. I sat in the dark of my car and unlocked the screen. The notifications were cascading down like a waterfall of hate. Tasha had been busy. She had posted a new video to all her platforms. Unlike her usual polished content where she looked like a supermodel this time, she had set the scene to look pathetic. She was wearing an old, oversized t-shirt, and she had clearly scrubbed off her makeup to reveal red, blotchy skin. She was crying soft, practiced tears that stopped exactly at her jawline without ruining her complexion. The caption read, "The truth about my sister." I pressed play. "I do not want to do this, guys," Tasha whispered into the camera, wiping her nose. "But I cannot stay silent anymore. You all know my nephew Leo passed away. We are devastated. But what you do not know is that my sister Keisha has been keeping the funeral donations for herself." My jaw dropped. The audacity was breathtaking. She continued sniffling. "My parents and I paid for everything. We sold our home to pay for Leo's medical bills. And now Keisha is taking the insurance money and the GoFundMe donations to go on a luxury vacation. She refuses to help us pay off the debts we incurred saving her son. She calls us parasites." Then the screen cut to a grainy audio recording. It was from the restaurant, but it was heavily edited. You heard my voice saying, "The money is for the living. I keep the 500,000. I froze. Those were my father's words, spliced together with my voice. She had used an AI voice editor, or simply cut my sentences so skillfully that it sounded like a confession. The video ended with Tasha burying her face in her hands. "Please pray for my parents," she sobbed. "They are homeless because they love their grandson too much. The internet does not wait for facts. The internet feeds on outrage." The comments section was a war zone. Thousands of strangers were calling me a monster. They called me a thief. They called me a narcissist. People were tagging my employer, demanding I be fired immediately. My LinkedIn inbox was already full of death threats. My professional reputation, the one thing I had built entirely on my own, was being dismantled by a lie. I walked into my house and locked the door. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I went straight to my home office and booted up my 3-monitor setup. Silence is a weapon. If I responded now, I would look defensive. If I argued, I would look guilty. So I gave them silence. I turned off my phone notifications and opened my forensic software. I started analyzing the attack vector. Tasha had 500,000 followers, but her engagement rate had always been suspiciously low. Tonight, however, her engagement was astronomical. Too astronomical. I ran a script to analyze the comments on her video. I looked for patterns. Humans are messy. They make typos. They use different slang they post at irregular intervals. But these comments were perfect. Monster, selfish, give the money back. They appeared in waves exactly 3 seconds apart. The accounts posting them had generic names followed by 8 random digits. Their profile pictures were stock photos. I leaned back in my chair and cracked my knuckles. These were not outraged citizens. These were bots. I traced the IP addresses. A few were from real people, mostly Tasha's high school friends who loved drama, but 80% of the traffic was coming from a single server farm in Southeast Asia. This was a paid smear campaign, a click farm. Someone had paid thousands of dollars to destroy my life in the last 2 hours. I dug deeper. I accessed the public ledger of the marketing agency that Tasha followed on Instagram. It was a shady company that promised viral growth. I hacked into their invoicing portal using a backdoor I had discovered during a fraud investigation last year. I found the invoice. It was time-stamped 30 minutes after I left the restaurant. Package purchased. Crisis management and reputation destruction. Cost $5,000. I looked at the payment method. It was not a corporate account. It was a personal credit card ending in 4099. I knew those numbers. I pulled up my father's credit report, which I had access to as his emergency contact. There it was. A pending charge of $5,000 on his Visa card. Brad. Brad had used my father's credit card to pay a click farm to ruin me. My father, who just claimed he needed money for retirement, was unknowingly funding a cybercrime. I took a screenshot. I saved the server logs. I downloaded the invoice. They wanted a war on social media. But they had forgotten that the internet leaves footprints. And I was the hunter who knew how to track them. I closed my laptop and finally allowed myself to smile. They had just handed me a federal crime on a silver platter. Wire fraud and cyber harassment across state lines. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Let them have their viral moment. I was building a cage and they were walking right into it. The glass walls of the Turner and Associates building usually offered a commanding view of the Atlanta skyline, but today they offered a front row seat to my absolute humiliation. I was in the middle of a deposition regarding a massive corporate fraud case when my assistant Sarah knocked on the glass door. Her face was pale. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Keisha," she whispered, "you need to come down to the lobby immediately. Security is asking for you. It is your parents." I felt the blood drain from my face. I apologized to the client and took the elevator down to the ground floor. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but I kept my face completely neutral. I was a professional. I dealt with criminals and liars for a living. I could handle my own family. When the elevator doors slid open, I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice was shrill, echoing off the polished marble floors. "We just want justice," she was screaming at a terrified receptionist who looked ready to cry. "That is my daughter up there living the high life in her ivory tower, while her own flesh and blood starve." I stepped into the lobby, and there they were. My parents. The same people who cared more about their image at the country club than anything else were now standing in a corporate lobby holding hand-painted signs. The signs were crude, made of poster board and glitter glue. They read "Ungrateful child stole our future" and "Justice for Leo." They were weaponizing my dead son's name to extort money from me in front of my colleagues. I walked toward them, my heels clicking sharply on the stone. The lobby was full of clients, lawyers, and partners returning from lunch. Everyone was staring. The shame was hot and prickling on my skin, but I pushed it down. "Mom. Dad, stop this now," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You are embarrassing yourselves." My father Otis turned to me. He looked disheveled, playing the part of the destitute victim perfectly. "We are not embarrassed, Keisha," he shouted so everyone could hear. "You should be embarrassed. You abandoned us. You stole our grandson's legacy." Mr. Robert Vance, the senior partner of the firm, walked out of his office near the lobby. He was a man of few words and immense power. He adjusted his silk tie and walked straight up to my father. Otis looked at Robert's tailored suit, and for a second he hesitated. Sir Robert said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is private property. You are disrupting business operations. I suggest you leave before I have you escorted out in handcuffs for trespassing and harassment." My father puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidated but failing. "We have rights," he sputtered. "We are whistleblowers. We have a right to protest injustice." Robert did not blink. He turned to the head of security. "Marcus, remove them, and if they return, call the police immediately." I did not yell. I did not cry. I walked up to Marcus, who I had known for 5 years. "Marcus, please remove these trespassers," I said clearly. "They are not family. They are strangers harassing an employee." My mother gasped, clutching her sign to her chest like a shield. "Keisha, how could you? You are heartless." I turned my back on them. As security guided them toward the revolving doors, I felt the eyes of the entire firm on me. I knew the whispers would start by the end of the day, but I held my head high. I had nothing to be ashamed of. They were the ones making a spectacle. The drama was not over. 10 minutes later, I was back in my office trying to salvage the deposition. I walked to the window to close the blinds, wanting to block out the memory of the scene below. That is when I saw him. Brad. He was not with my parents. While they were distracting security at the front entrance, he had slipped around to the employee parking lot. I watched in horror from the fourth-floor window as he stood up from crouching beside my sedan. He casually tossed something metallic into the bushes. Then he looked up. He knew exactly where my office was. He looked straight at the window and smirked. It was a chilling, satisfied smile. He tapped his wrist as if to say, "Time is running out." I grabbed my phone and dialed down to the parking attendant. "Check my car," I said. "Now." A moment later, the attendant called back. "All 4 tires, Ms. Brooks, slashed, and the paint is keyed." He carved the word thief into the hood. They had escalated from emotional blackmail to physical destruction. Brad thought he had won. He thought stranding me at work would break me. But he had made a fatal error. The parking lot had 4K surveillance cameras installed last week. He had just committed felony vandalism on camera. I hung up the phone and dialed a different number. This time I was not calling a lawyer. I was calling Mike, a private investigator who specialized in finding dirt on people who thought they were clean. "Mike," I said when he answered, "I have a job for you. I need you to find everything. Every gambling debt, every hidden account, every dirty secret my brother-in-law has ever had. I am going to destroy him." The man at the door wore a cheap brown suit and refused to make eye contact. He asked for my name, and when I confirmed it, he thrust a thick envelope into my hand and walked away without a word. I knew what it was before I even opened it. In my line of work, I saw these envelopes all the time, but usually I was the one sending them, not receiving them. I walked into the kitchen and tore open the seal. The header was bold and terrifying: "Petition for emergency guardianship and conservatorship of estate." I sank onto a kitchen stool, my legs suddenly unable to hold my weight. I began to read. My parents were not just suing me for the money. That would have been too simple. They were suing for control over me. They were petitioning the family court to declare me mentally incompetent. The document was a masterpiece of fiction. Petitioner alleges that the respondent, Keisha Brooks, is suffering from acute post-traumatic stress, manifesting as emotional blunting and reckless financial hoarding. It claimed that I was a danger to myself and that my refusal to share the inheritance with the family was a symptom of a paranoid delusion. But the paragraph that made me stop breathing was Exhibit A. It read, "The respondent displayed a disturbing lack of affect at the funeral of the minor child. While the rest of the family was visibly distraught, the respondent remained catatonic and cold, refusing to shed tears or accept comfort. This sociopathic detachment suggests a complete mental break, rendering her unfit to manage the substantial assets of the deceased." I lowered the paper. My hand was shaking. They were using my strength against me. They were using the fact that I held it together at the graveside so I could bury my son with dignity as proof that I was crazy. They wanted to punish me for not performing grief the way they performed everything else in their fake lives. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted but dry. For a terrifying second I doubted myself. Was I cold? Was I broken? Maybe they were right. A normal mother would be wailing. A normal mother would be collapsing. Maybe my refusal to give them the money was not principle. Maybe it was madness. The gaslighting was so precise and so intimate that it began to seep into the cracks of my mind. They knew exactly where to hit me. They knew my greatest fear was that I had failed Leo. Now they were telling a judge that my failure was a medical fact. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to James' office. I did not call ahead. I stormed past his receptionist, and threw the lawsuit onto his mahogany desk. Read it. I said, my voice trembling. Tell me if I am crazy, James. Tell me if I belong in a padded room. James picked up the document. He read it in silence. His face remained impassive, but I saw the muscle in his jaw jump. He flipped to the page with the affidavit from my mother. He read it twice. Then he threw the file back down. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet office. This is not a lawsuit, Keisha, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This is a character assassination. They are trying to get an emergency injunction to freeze your accounts. If the judge signs this, you will not be able to spend a dime without your father's permission. They want to cut off your resources so you cannot afford to fight them. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. They are banking on you being too ashamed to fight back, he continued. They think you will settle and write them a check just to make this public record go away. They are using the stigma of mental health to blackmail you. I looked at my hands. They were clenched into fists. Am I cold, James? I asked quietly. At the funeral, did I look like a sociopath? James turned around. You looked like a mother who was trying to survive the worst day of her life without falling apart. You looked like the only adult in a room full of children. He walked back to the desk and leaned forward. His eyes were dark and serious. Listen to me, Keisha. They have crossed a line. This is no longer a family dispute. This is war. They are trying to take your freedom. They are trying to take your autonomy. He opened his drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. They are playing dirty, he said, uncapping his pen. They are using lies and emotional manipulation. So we are going to stop being polite. We are going to play dirtier. We are going to countersue. And we are going to use every piece of dirt you found on that hard drive. I looked at the lawsuit one last time. The doubt in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Do it, I said. Burn them down. I drove home with a singular focus that pushed aside the grief and the exhaustion. For the first time since Leo died, I felt something other than sorrow. I felt useful. My lawyer James had given me permission to take the gloves off, and that was exactly what I intended to do. I walked into my home office and locked the door behind me. I turned on the coffee pot and powered up my server. Tonight I was not Keisha the mourning mother or the ungrateful daughter. I was Keisha Brooks, senior forensic accountant, and I was about to perform the most personal audit of my life. I started with the easy target. Brad. He claimed to be a top-tier real estate agent in Chicago. He bragged about closing million-dollar deals and driving luxury cars. I pulled up the Illinois State Licensing Board database. His license was active, but when I cross-referenced it with the multiple listing service, the truth began to emerge. Brad had not sold a single property in 22 months. His sales volume was zero. So where was the money coming from? I opened the file Mike, the private investigator, had sent over. It contained raw bank data and credit card statements that Brad had foolishly linked to a public email address. I imported the data into my analysis software and watched the patterns form on the screen. It was a sea of red. There were cash withdrawals, massive ones, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, all from ATMs located in casinos or near racetracks. But there was another recurring transaction that caught my eye. A weekly wire transfer to a shell company called Kincaid Consulting based in Nevada. The amounts were escalating. It started at 2,000 a week, then 5, then 10. I ran a background check on Kincaid Consulting. It was a ghost entity, no website, no employees, but it shared a registered address with a known associate of the Chicago organized crime syndicate. I sat back and let out a long breath. Brad was not investing in real estate. He was gambling. He was a whale, but he was a losing whale. I dug deeper into his emails. I found the correspondence I was looking for in his deleted folder. It was a thread from a user named Vinny. The latest email was dated yesterday. It was short and terrifying. You are out of time, Brad. The boss is losing patience. You owe us $200,000. If we do not see a transfer by Friday, we are sending someone to collect, and they are going to take a finger for every 10,000 you are short. I looked at the calendar. Friday was 3 days away. That explained the urgency. That explained why they invaded my house. That explained the ridiculous healing center proposal. They did not want to build a sanctuary. They needed $4.5 million to pay off a loan shark before Brad lost his hand. But I was not done. I turned my attention to Tasha. My parents had claimed they sold their condo to come help me. They played the martyrs. But my parents were risk-averse. They loved that condo. It was their retirement safety net. I accessed the county property records for Cook County. The deed to their condo was still in their name. They had not sold it, but there was a lien against it recorded 6 months ago. I pulled the mortgage documents. It was a home equity line of credit for $300,000, the maximum value of the property. I looked at the signatures. My father's signature looked shaky. My mother's looked slightly off, and the notary stamp belonged to a friend of Tasha from high school. I traced where that $300,000 went. It did not go to my parents' account. It went directly into an account solely controlled by Tasha. And then I saw the outflows. First-class flights to Dubai, designer handbags, a lease on a Range Rover, Botox, fillers. Tasha had forged our parents' signatures to mortgage their entire future. She had stolen their retirement home out from under them to fund her fake influencer lifestyle. My parents thought they were sacrificing for me, but in reality they were already homeless. They just did not know it yet. Tasha had bled them dry, and now she needed Leo's money to refill the well before they found out. The puzzle was complete. This was not a family grieving together. This was a group of desperate drowning people trying to use my son's legacy as a life raft. They were broke. They were in debt to dangerous criminals. And they had committed multiple felonies, including forgery, wire fraud, and identity theft. I leaned back in my leather chair and watched the cursor blink on the screen. The blue light reflected in my eyes. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in my chest. "Aha," I whispered to the empty room. "I have got you." They thought they were pressuring me. They thought they held the power because they were the parents and I was the child. But numbers do not care about hierarchy. Numbers are the ultimate truth. And the truth was, I owned them. I saved every file. I backed up the evidence to 3 different cloud servers. I printed hard copies. Then I looked at the date again. Friday. They needed the money by Friday. Perfect. I would make them think they were going to get it. I would let them believe they had won right up until the moment the trap snapped shut. I knew they were desperate, but I did not think they were stupid enough to commit a felony on a Wednesday night. I was wrong. It was 3 in the morning when the silent alarm on my phone vibrated against my nightstand. The house was pitch black and silent, the kind of silence that usually brought me comfort, but tonight it felt heavy with anticipation. I did not reach for the taser this time. I did not reach for the landline to call the police. Instead, I reached for my iPad. I had installed hidden 4K cameras in every room of the house the day after I kicked them out. They were microscopic lenses, hidden in smoke detectors, and bookshelves powered by their own internal batteries. I tapped the screen and the live feed from the downstairs hallway flickered to life in crisp night vision. There he was, Brad. He was wearing a black hoodie pulled up over his head, but he had forgotten to cover his face. He was sweating. I could see the sheen of it on his forehead even in the grainy black and white footage. He was moving jerkily like a puppet with cut strings. He was terrified. The loan sharks must have given him a final warning. He looked less like a villain and more like a cornered animal. He bypassed the silverware in the dining room. He bypassed the expensive electronics in the living room. He went straight for my home office. He tried the handle, but it was locked. I watched as he pulled a screwdriver from his pocket and jammed it into the frame. He was clumsy and loud. Wood splintered. If I had been asleep, the noise would have woken me. But I was not asleep. I was watching him like a scientist observing a rat in a maze. He kicked the door open and stumbled inside. I winced slightly at the damage to the wood, but I stayed in bed. I pulled the duvet up to my chin and watched him destroy my workspace. He was tearing books off the shelves. He was sweeping papers onto the floor. He was looking for a wall safe or a hidden lockbox. He was checking behind the paintings. He was pulling out drawers and dumping their contents onto the carpet. But I knew he would not find a safe. I had moved all the sensitive documents and the real trust fund certificates to a secure off-site facility 2 days ago. Instead, I had left something else for him. A single manila folder sitting right in the center of my mahogany desk. It was placed perfectly under the beam of the moonlight coming through the window. It was the only thing on the desk that looked orderly amidst the chaos he was creating. I watched on the screen as he paused. He was panting heavy breaths that I imagined sounded like a panic attack. Then he saw the folder. He lunged for it. I zoomed in on the video feed. I could see his hands shaking uncontrollably as he opened it. The label on the folder read, "Draft Petition for Trust, Liquidation and Transfer of Assets to Immediate Family." It was a fake. A complete fabrication I had typed up myself earlier that evening, using legal jargon that sounded impressive, but meant absolutely nothing in a court of law. But Brad did not know that. He was not a lawyer. He was a gambler looking for a miracle to save his fingers. I watched his face transform. His eyes went wide. He let out a breath that fogged up the air in front of him. He smiled. It was a manic, desperate smile. He thought he had found the golden ticket. He thought I had caved under the pressure of the lawsuit and the social media harassment. He thought I had drafted the paperwork to give them exactly what they wanted. He fumbled for his phone, almost dropping it twice. He took picture after picture of the fake documents. He photographed the signature page where I had forged my own signature to look shaky and hesitant, as if I had signed it under duress. He photographed the breakdown of funds, which showed a transfer date scheduled for next Monday. He shoved the folder back onto the desk, not bothering to clean up the mess he had made. He turned and ran out of the room, clutching his phone to his chest like it was a holy relic. A minute later, I heard the back door slam shut. I switched the camera feed to the driveway. I watched him sprint to his car, looking over his shoulder. He drove away without turning on his headlights, speeding into the night to tell my parents and Tasha that they had won. My heart was beating a steady, calm rhythm. A normal person would have called 911. A normal person would be terrified that an intruder had just been in their home. But I was not afraid. I was exhilarated. Brad now had proof that I was planning to pay them. He would go back to the loan sharks and beg for a few more days, telling them that payday was imminent. He would tell Tasha to stop the attacks because the money was coming. He would dig himself deeper into the hole, believing he had a ladder to climb out. He did not know that the ladder was made of smoke. I closed the iPad and placed it back on the nightstand. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling where the shadows danced. He took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. Now all I had to do was wait for them to make the next move. They thought they were hunting me, but they had just walked right into the cage I built for them. The cheap motel room where my family was staying must have felt like a palace that night. I could imagine the scene perfectly. Brad bursting through the door, his chest heaving with adrenaline, waving his phone like a winning lottery ticket. He would have thrown the device onto the bedspread, showing them the photos of the fake documents sitting on my desk. "Look at the signature," he would have shouted, pointing at my forgery. "Look at the date. Next Monday. She is folding. She is actually doing it." I can picture Tasha's face lighting up, the blue light of the screen reflecting in her greedy eyes. She probably zoomed in on the numbers, counting the zeros. $4.5 million. In her mind, she was already spending it. She was probably already browsing Zillow for beachfront properties and adding designer furniture to her cart. For days they had been living in terror of Brad's loan sharks and their own looming bankruptcy. But in 1 second that fear vanished, replaced by the arrogant certainty that they had won. They believed that their pressure campaign had worked. They believed that the lawsuit, the bots, and the vandalism had finally broken me. They did not know that the document was a prop, and they were just actors in a play I was directing. Back in my dark, quiet office, I prepared for the second act. I sat in my chair and took a few deep breaths. I needed to sound exhausted. I needed to sound defeated. I needed to sound like the weak, compliant daughter they had spent 30 years training me to be. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number. It rang only once. Hello? Her voice was sharp-guarded. She was expecting a fight. Mom, I whispered, letting my voice crack just enough to sound pathetic. It is Keisha. There was a pause. I could hear rustling in the background. She was probably shushing Tasha and Brad, putting me on speaker so they could all gloat together. What do you want, Keisha? She asked, but there was a new lightness in her tone. She already knew. Brad had told her. I cannot do this anymore, Mom, I said, letting a sob escape my throat. The lawsuit, the people on the internet calling me a monster, the tires on my car. It is too much. I am falling apart. I just want it to stop. Please tell me how to make it stop. I waited. This was the test. If they were decent human beings, they would be concerned about my mental state. They would apologize. But they were not decent. They were sharks smelling blood. My mother's voice changed instantly. It was a transformation so sudden and so complete, it was almost terrifying. The harshness evaporated, replaced by a sickly sweet tone that made my stomach turn. Oh, honey, she cooed. Don't cry. We never wanted to hurt you. We were just so worried about you. We knew you were not thinking clearly. We just wanted to help you do the right thing. The gaslighting was masterful. 5 minutes ago, I was an ungrateful thief. Now that I was surrendering, I was her beloved daughter again. I took a shaky breath, playing my part. You were right, I lied. My fingers crossed under the desk. I am not thinking clearly. Leo is gone, and I am all alone. I do not need all that money. I just want my family back. You have us, baby, my father shouted from the background. We are right here. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to vomit. Okay, I said. I am ready to sign. I drafted the papers. I am ready to transfer the trust. I need to know. Is the deal still on? What deal, sweetie? My mother asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. 3 million for Tasha, I recited. 1 million for you and Dad. And I keep 500,000. Is that what you want? Yes, Tasha yelled from across the room, unable to contain herself. Yes, that is fair, Keisha. It is exactly what Leo would have wanted. And if I sign? I continued, my voice barely a whisper. Will you drop the lawsuit? Will you tell the internet to stop hating me? Will you leave me alone? Of course, my mother said soothingly. We will make it all go away. We will be a happy family again, just like before. A happy family. A family built on blackmail and theft. Okay, I said, sniffling loudly for effect. I cannot meet today. I am a mess. But I can meet on Friday. Come to James's law office at 10 in the morning. I will have the notary there. We can sign everything and initiate the wire transfer. Friday, Brad shouted. Yes, Friday works. Friday is perfect. Of course it was. Friday was the deadline for his fingers. Okay, Mom, I said. I will see you Friday. Please, just tell Tasha to stop posting about me. I will handle it, she promised. Get some sleep, Keisha. You made the right choice. We are so proud of you. I hung up the phone. The silence of the room rushed back in. I dropped the act instantly. My spine straightened. The tears I had faked dried on my cheeks, leaving me cold and focused. Proud of me. They were proud that they had successfully bullied a grieving mother into submission. They were proud of their cruelty. I looked at the calendar. Today was Wednesday. They had 2 days to celebrate. 2 days to spend money they did not have. 2 days to dig their own graves deeper. I opened my laptop and sent a secure message to James. Subject: the trap is set. Message: they took the bait. The meeting is confirmed for Friday at 10 a.m. Have the police on standby in the conference room next door. And James. Make sure the air conditioning is set to freezing. I want them to be shivering when they realize what they have actually signed. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the moon was full, casting a pale light over the driveway where Brad had slashed my tires. "Enjoy your victory lap, Brad," I whispered to the night. "Because Friday is going to be a bloodbath, and I am going to enjoy every single second of it." I sat in the stillness of my home office, watching the cursor blink on my screen. The document attached to my draft email was titled Settlement Agreement and Release of Claims. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard surrender. It looked like a beaten woman handing over her fortune to her tormentors just to make the pain stop. But to a forensic accountant, it was a loaded gun pointing directly at the person who signed it. I took a sip of cold coffee and pressed send. The digital whoosh of the email leaving my outbox was the only sound in the room. I did not have to wait long. Less than 30 seconds later, my phone lit up. It was Brad. He did not even say hello. "Did you send it?" he asked, his voice tight with a mixture of panic and hope. "I sent it," I replied, keeping my voice flat and defeated. "I just want this over, Brad. I cannot take the harassment anymore. But before you get too excited, you need to read the terms. I am not handing over $4.5 million without conditions." I heard Tasha in the background. She sounded frantic. "What conditions?" "Just give us the money, Keisha. Stop playing games." I put the phone on speaker and leaned back in my chair. "There are 3 main conditions," I said, "and they are non-negotiable. If you do not agree to all of them, I will delete the transfer order, and we can spend the next 5 years fighting in probate court. Do you want the money on Friday, or do you want to wait until you are old and gray?" There was a silence on the other end. I knew I had them. They needed that money to save Brad's fingers and pay off their debts within 48 hours. They did not have 5 years. They did not even have 5 days. "Fine," Brad snapped. "What are the conditions?" "Condition 1," I said. "You must publicly retract every single lie you told about me. Tasha needs to post a video across all her platforms admitting that I did not steal donations. She must state that it was a misunderstanding and that I have been a responsible trustee. The video must stay up for a minimum of 1 year." I heard Tasha scoff. "Easy. I will say whatever you want. I will tell them you are Mother Teresa if it gets me my check. Who cares what the internet thinks? I can just rebrand later." I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. Her willingness to lie to her followers was pathetic, but it was useful. "Condition 2," I continued. "This is a total severance of ties. Once the money is transferred, you must sign a voluntary restraining order. You are banned from coming within 50 miles of my home or my workplace. You are banned from contacting me by phone, email, or through third parties. If you show up at my door again, if you send Mom to cry in my lobby, you void the agreement, and I can sue to reclaim the funds." My mother's voice came through the speaker, shrill and wounded. "Keisha, you cannot be serious. You are banning your own parents. You are cutting us out of your life forever over money. We are your flesh and blood." I looked at the photo of Leo on my desk. "You made your choice, Mom," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You chose the money over me a long time ago. Now I am just putting it in writing." "Fine," Brad interrupted, cutting off my mother's fake tears. "We agree. 50 miles. We will move to Malibu anyway. We do not want to be in this dump of a city. What is the 3rd condition?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the trap. "Condition 3," I said, speaking clearly. "The beneficiary assumes full legal and tax liability for the funds immediately upon receipt. By signing this, you acknowledge that as the trustee, I have advised you that these funds are subject to strict allocation rules. You accept all responsibility for how the money is spent, and you release me from any future audits or legal inquiries regarding the usage of the cash." I waited. This was the moment where a smart person would pause. A smart person would ask what strict allocation rules meant. A smart person would ask why I was so eager to wash my hands of legal liability. But Brad and Tasha were not smart. They were greedy and they were desperate. They heard release form and they thought it meant I was giving up. They did not realize that they were signing a confession that they were about to misuse restricted funds. Is that it? Tasha asked, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. You just want us to sign a waiver so you do not get sued later. God, you are so paranoid, Keisha. You are such a boring accountant. I am just protecting myself, I said softly. Tasha laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound that grated against my ears. Kicking us out of your life and making us sign a liability waiver. You really are bitter, aren't you? But you know what, Keisha, I do not care. Sign the paper, transfer the money, and you can rot in that big empty house with your cats for all I care. I them gaplai bachi danuane. Just give me the cash and I will forget you ever existed. Her cruelty was the final stamp of approval I needed. Okay, I said. Print the document, sign it, and bring it to James' law office tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Bring your IDs. We are doing this by the book. I hung up the phone. The room was silent again, but the air felt charged with electricity. They thought they had bullied me into submission. They thought the liability clause was just bureaucratic red tape. They had no idea that by accepting full responsibility for the funds, they were accepting full responsibility for the crime they were about to commit. I looked at the screen one last time. Goodbye, Tasha, I whispered. Enjoy the money while it lasts, because it is going to cost you everything. The air conditioning in the conference room of James' law firm was set to 60 degrees just as I had requested. It was freezing. The cold air blasted from the vents, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a morgue than a place of business. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table with my hands folded calmly in front of me. To my right, James sat with a thick stack of documents. To my left sat my family, or what used to be my family. The contrast between them was pathetic. Brad looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was wearing a heavy jacket, but he was shivering violently. Sweat beaded on his forehead, dripping down his nose despite the frigid temperature. He kept checking his watch every 30 seconds, his leg bouncing under the table with a nervous energy that shook the water glasses. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking about the loan sharks. He was thinking about his fingers. He was thinking that tomorrow was the deadline, and if this money did not clear, he was a dead man walking. Tasha, on the other hand, was radiating pure arrogance. She was immune to the cold fueled by the heat of her own greed. She was scrolling through the Land Rover website on her phone, holding the screen up to show my mother. Do you like the pearl white or the obsidian black? She asked loud enough for me to hear. I think white looks better for my personal brand, but black is more executive. My mother nodded absently, her eyes fixed on the documents in front of James. She looked hungry. Not for food, but for the validation that money brings. She was already mentally spending her share, probably planning how to buy back her friends at the country club, who had snubbed her when the rumors of their bankruptcy started. James cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the silent room. Before we proceed, he said, his voice professional and detached. I need to remind all parties that these documents are legally binding. Once signed, the transfer of $4.5 million will be initiated. However, you are also signing a voluntary restraining order and a full assumption of liability. We know, Tasha snapped, waving her hand dismissively. Just give us the papers, James. We read the draft. We agree to everything. We will never speak to Keisha again. We will take full responsibility. Just show us where to sign so we can get out of here. James slid the papers across the table. Brad grabbed a pen so fast he almost knocked over his water. He signed his name with a frantic scribbling motion. Tasha signed with a flourish, adding a little heart over the I in her name, as if she were signing an autograph for a fan. My parents signed next, their hands steady with betrayal. They pushed the papers back to me. Now it was my turn. I reached for the document, but I did not pick up the pen James offered. Instead, I rested my hand on the paper and looked directly at my sister. Wait, I said softly. Brad let out a strangled groan. What now, Keisha? Sign the damn paper. I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Tasha. I needed to hear it one last time. I needed to be absolutely certain that there was not a shred of humanity left in her. I needed to know that the trap I was about to spring was not just legal, but moral. Tasha, I said. Look at me. She sighed, rolling her eyes, but she looked up. Her face was bored. I just need to know one thing, I asked. Do you actually miss him? Do you miss Leo? Or is this really just about the money? The room went silent. Even Brad stopped bouncing his leg. This was the moment for her to lie. This was the moment for her to fake a tear, to say she loved her nephew, to say this was all for his memory. If she had shown even a flicker of genuine remorse, I might have hesitated. But Tasha smiled. It was a cold, pitying smile. Oh, Keisha, she said, leaning forward. You want the truth. Fine. Let us be real. Leo was a sweet kid, but he was a burden. He was sick all the time. He cost a fortune in medical bills. He took up all your time. To be honest, him dying was kind of a release for everyone, wasn't it? It is better this way. He is not suffering, and now his money can actually do something useful. It is going to help me shine. It is going to help the family rise again. So no, I do not miss the hospital visits and the drama. I am ready to move on. She sat back, looking satisfied with her cruelty. She thought she had won. She thought she had just delivered a hard truth that I needed to hear. She did not know she had just delivered her own sentence. A release. She called my son's death a release. She called his life a burden. I looked at my mother. She did not correct Tasha. She did not look shocked. She just stared at the signature line, waiting for the check. I nodded slowly. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The last thread of guilt I had about what I was about to do snapped. Okay, I said. Thank you for your honesty, Tasha. I reached into my purse. I did not take the black ballpoint pen that lay on the table. In the world of accounting, black ink means profit. Black ink means things are good. Instead, I pulled out a pen from my own pocket. It was bright red, the color of debt, the color of warning, the color of blood. I uncapped the red pen. The sound of the cap coming off was sharp in the quiet room. I signed my name on the trustee line. The red ink stood out violently against the white paper. Done, I said, closing the folder. Brad let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Tasha clapped her hands together. Finally, she squealed. When does the money hit? James picked up the folder. He looked at the red signature, then he looked at me. He knew exactly what it meant. The transfer has been authorized. James said, his face unreadable. Depending on the bank, it should clear by Monday morning. Monday, Brad choked out. But today is Friday. We need it today. Wire transfers take time, James said, packing up his briefcase. But you have the signed agreement. You can show that to your creditors. I am sure they will accept it as proof of funds. Brad nodded, wiping sweat from his face. Yeah, they have to. It is signed. We are rich. I stood up. I did not say goodbye. I did not look back. I walked out of the conference room, leaving them celebrating a victory that was actually their funeral. I walked out into the warm lobby, and for the first time in weeks, I did not feel cold. I felt the warmth of justice. They had signed their lives away, and they did not even know it. While I sat in the quiet sanctuary of my home 3 miles away, my family was undoubtedly making a scene at the Gilded Fork. I did not need a hidden camera to know exactly what was happening. I knew them too well. Tasha would be ordering the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu, not because she liked the taste, but because she liked how the price tag looked on her Instagram story. My mother would be speaking a little too loudly to the waiter, making sure the surrounding tables knew that the Brooks family was back on top. They were celebrating a victory that had not even happened yet, banking on a future that I had already rewritten. But the most important moment of their night was happening outside near the valet stand. I knew Brad. I knew the crushing weight of fear that had been riding on his shoulders for weeks. As soon as the appetizers arrived, he would have excused himself, clutching his phone like a lifeline. He would have stepped out into the cool evening air, his hands shaking not from the cold, but from the adrenaline of a man who just narrowly avoided execution. I could picture him dialing the number he had been dreading. Vinny, the enforcer, the man who had promised to take a finger for every $10,000 Brad was short. "Hello, Vinny," Brad would say, his voice breathless and high-pitched. "It is Brad. I have it. I have the money." He would pause, listening to the gruff skepticism on the other end. "No, I am serious," Brad would insist, pulling the folded settlement agreement out of his pocket, the paper likely stained with his sweat. "I have the signed documents. The trust transfer is authorized. 4.5 million. It clears Monday morning. I can send you a picture of the signature." "It is a done deal, Vinny. I told you I was good for it." He would snap a photo of my red signature under the street lamp and hit send. Then he would wait, holding his breath, until Vinny replied with a single word. "Good." Brad would hang up and lean against the brick wall of the restaurant, feeling the tension drain out of his body. He thought he was safe. He thought he had outsmarted the system. He would walk back into that dining room feeling like a king, ready to drink champagne and toast to his brilliance. He had no idea that he had just confirmed his own destruction. By sending that photo to a known loan shark, he had created the final link in the chain of evidence I needed. Back in my living room, the atmosphere was sacred. I had turned off all the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the street lamps filtering through the curtains. On the coffee table, I had set up a small altar for Leo. His framed school photo, the one where he was missing a front tooth, sat in the center. Beside it lay his favorite small Lego figure and a vanilla-scented candle. I struck a match and watched the flame catch the wick. The scent of vanilla filled the air, sweet and comforting. "This is for you, baby boy," I whispered to the empty room. "You wanted to save the world. Tonight we are going to start." I pulled my laptop onto my lap. The screen was the only bright light in the room, illuminating my face in a ghostly blue. I logged into the secure trust fund portal. The interface was sterile and cold, a stark contrast to the emotional storm raging inside me. I entered my username. I entered the complex 64-character password. I waited for the two-factor authentication code to ping on my phone. The dashboard loaded. There it was. Current balance $4,500,000 and 0 cents. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was enough to buy freedom. It was enough to buy power. And my family had tried to steal it to buy vanity. I navigated to the transfer tab. I had already set up the beneficiary information earlier that week. The destination account was verified. The routing number was locked in. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30 in the evening. The banks were closed for the weekend, which meant the transaction would sit in a pending state until Monday morning at 9. Just enough time for Brad to enjoy his weekend. Just enough time for Tasha to pick out her new car. I hovered my cursor over the button labeled Execute Transfer. My finger hesitated for a fraction of a second. Not because I had doubts, but because I wanted to savor the moment. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this button, I was not just moving money. I was detonating a bomb that would blow up my entire family. I was choosing justice over blood. I looked at Leo's photo one last time. I remembered the way my mother looked at the funeral, dry-eyed and impatient. I remembered Tasha calling his life a burden. I pressed the enter key. The screen refreshed. A spinning wheel appeared in the center. Processing. I held my breath. Then a green checkmark appeared. Transfer initiated. Status pending. New available balance $0. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank app. You have authorized a wire transfer of $4.5 million. It was done. The money was gone. I closed the laptop and blew out the candle. In the darkness, I smiled. They were popping champagne at the Gilded Fork right now, thinking they were millionaires. But they were already bankrupt. They just had to wait until Monday to find out. Monday morning broke with a clear blue sky over Chicago, the kind of deceptively beautiful day that makes you believe anything is possible. For Brad and Tasha, it was the day their lives were supposed to change forever. I was not there physically, but I saw the security footage later, and the police report filled in every colorful detail. They arrived at the downtown branch of First National Bank at exactly 9 o'clock, the moment the doors unlocked. Brad was wearing his best suit, though it looked wrinkled as if he had been pacing in it all night. Tasha was wearing oversized designer sunglasses indoors, clutching her phone like a scepter ready to document the moment she became a millionaire. They did not wait in line. They walked straight to the first available teller, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, who offered them a polite smile that was about to disappear very quickly. "I am here to access the Brooks Family Trust account," Brad announced loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. He slapped his ID and the transfer confirmation onto the marble counter. "We are expecting a wire of $4.5 million. I want to withdraw $50,000 in cash immediately and get a cashier's check for the rest." Tasha leaned over the counter, lowering her sunglasses. "And make sure the bills are crisp," she added. "I am doing an unboxing video in the car." Brenda nodded and began typing. Brad drummed his fingers on the counter, a rapid staccato rhythm that betrayed his terrifying deadline. He checked his watch. He looked at the door, probably expecting Vinny the loan shark to be watching him from across the street. The typing stopped. Brenda frowned. She hit the enter key again. Then she adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to the screen. The polite customer service mask slipped, revealing genuine confusion and then sudden alarm. She did not look at Brad. Her hand moved subtly under the counter, pressing the silent alarm button. "Is there a problem?" Brad asked, his voice tight. "Why did you stop typing?" Brenda took a step back from the counter. "Sir, I am going to need you to wait a moment. I need to get the branch manager." "We do not have time for managers," Brad snapped, his voice rising. "The money is there. My sister-in-law sent it Friday night. Just give me my cash." The branch manager, Mr. Manager. Henderson walked over quickly, sensing the escalation. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. He looked at Brad, then at Tasha, then back at the screen as if he was seeing a ghost. Mr. Henderson did not offer a smile. He did not offer a handshake. He kept the glass partition between them. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice low and grave, "I am afraid we cannot complete this transaction." "What do you mean you cannot?" Brad yelled. "The money is mine. I have the paperwork." "The money is physically in the account, sir," Mr. Henderson explained. "But the account has been flagged. 10 minutes ago we received a federal freeze order." The lobby went silent. Tasha dropped her phone. It hit the marble floor with a crack, but she did not even look at it. "A freeze," Brad whispered, the blood draining from his face. "What are you talking about?" "This account has been locked by a joint task force involving the IRS and the FBI," Mr. Henderson said, reading from the monitor. "The funds are flagged as proceeds of wire fraud and embezzlement involving a charitable organization. We have been instructed to hold the funds and detain anyone attempting to access them." The words hit Brad like a physical blow. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. The terms of the agreement he had signed without reading rushed back to him. The liability clause. The strict allocation rules. He realized too late that by accepting the money into a personal account instead of a registered charity, he had triggered an immediate federal crime. "No," Brad screamed. "That is a lie. She set me up. That witch set me up." He lunged at the glass partition, his fingers clawing at the metal, seeking a way to get to the computer to change reality. "Give me the money," he howled. "I need that money today. They are going to kill me." "Sir, step back immediately," the manager shouted, retreating. But Brad was past reason. The terror of the loan sharks was greater than the fear of the bank manager. He grabbed a heavy metal pen holder from the counter and smashed it against the bulletproof glass. Tasha began to shriek. It was a high, piercing sound. "My money," she screamed. "You cannot take my money. I already ordered the Range Rover." Two uniformed security guards rushed from the corners of the room. They grabbed Brad by the arms, trying to pull him away from the counter. Brad fought with the strength of a desperate man. He threw an elbow, catching one guard in the jaw. "I am not leaving without my money," he roared, kicking over a velvet rope stanchion. He was wrestling the guards on the floor, his expensive suit tearing at the seams, when the wail of sirens cut through the air outside. Blue and red lights flashed against the bank windows. Brad stopped fighting. He lay on the cold marble floor, pinned down by a guard, his chest heaving. He turned his head and looked at the glass doors. He saw the police officers running toward the entrance, guns drawn. And in that moment, watching the scene unfold from the safety of my office across town, I knew he finally understood. He had not just lost the money. He had lost his freedom. The trap had snapped shut, and there was no way out. The fluorescent lights of the interrogation room hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to amplify the tension in the air. My family was seated on one side of the metal table, looking like a group of aristocrats who had been dragged through the mud. Brad was handcuffed, one wrist attached to the table leg, his expensive suit torn at the shoulder from his tussle with the bank security guards. Tasha was sitting next to him, her mascara running down her face in black streaks, clutching her purse as if it contained the last shred of her dignity. My parents sat huddled together, looking small and terrified, their eyes darting around the room like trapped animals. When I walked in, flanked by my lawyer, James, and Detective Miller, the atmosphere shifted instantly from fear to pure, unadulterated rage. Brad lunged forward only to be jerked back by the cuffs. "Tell them," he screamed, his voice hoarse. "Tell them this is a mistake, Keisha. Tell them you authorized the transfer. They think I am stealing my own money." I pulled out the metal chair opposite them and sat down slowly. I placed my leather portfolio on the table and smoothed the cover. I did not look at Brad. I looked at Detective Miller. "He is not stealing his own money, Detective," I said, my voice calm and measured. "He is attempting to embezzle funds from a registered nonprofit organization." The room went deadly silent. Tasha stopped crying mid-sob. My father Otis frowned, his forehead wrinkling in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Tasha snapped, her voice shrill. "You transferred the money to the account named Tasha Brooks Fund. That is my account. You named it after me. It is my money." I opened the portfolio and pulled out the document they had signed on Friday. The red ink of my signature was still vivid against the white paper. I turned it around and slid it across the table, pointing to a paragraph in the middle of the second page. The print was small, but it was legible. "Clause 13, Section B," I read aloud. "The beneficiary acknowledges that the receiving entity, known as the Tasha Brooks Fund, is a 501c3 tax-exempt charitable organization established for the sole purpose of pediatric heart defect research and awareness. Any withdrawal or usage of funds must strictly align with the organization's mission statement. Personal use of these funds for real estate luxury goods or debt repayment constitutes federal charity fraud and embezzlement." I looked up. Tasha's mouth was hanging open. Brad looked like he was going to be sick. "You see," I continued, leaning forward slightly, "when you demanded the money, I gave you exactly what you asked for. I transferred $4.5 million into a fund bearing your name. But I registered that fund as a charity in Leo's honor 2 days before you signed this. I am the chairman of the board. You are merely the treasurers." My mother stood up, her hands shaking. "You tricked us. You let us think we were rich." "I did not trick you, Mom," I said, coldness radiating from me. "I gave you a contract. You were so blinded by greed, so desperate to get your hands on the cash to save Brad's skin, that you did not read what you were signing. You assumed liability, remember? You signed a waiver saying you understood the strict allocation rules." Detective Miller picked up the document and read it, nodding slowly. He looked at Brad with a mixture of pity and disgust. "So let me get this straight, Mr. Brooks," the detective said. "You walked into a federally insured bank and demanded $50,000 in cash from a charity account to buy a Range Rover and pay off personal debts." Brad stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "I didn't know. She didn't tell me." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," Brad James interjected smoothly. "And ignorance of a contract you signed in the presence of a lawyer is definitely not a defense. By attempting to withdraw those funds for personal use, you committed a felony act. The wire transfer this morning was the bait, and you swallowed it whole." Tasha let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "My house," she cried. "My center. It is all gone." "It was never yours, Tasha," I said, standing up. "It belongs to the children who have the same heart condition that killed Leo." Every single cent of that 4.5 million is going to pay for surgeries for kids who cannot afford them. You are not a millionaire. You are just a failed thief who tried to rob a charity. Brad slumped forward, putting his head on the table. He knew it was over. He knew that the federal charges were the least of his problems. The news of his arrest would hit the papers within the hour. The loan sharks would know he did not have the money. He was trapped in a police station, but outside these walls a much darker fate was waiting for him. I looked at them one last time. They wanted to use my son's death for a payday. Instead, they had just donated his entire inheritance to saving lives, and they were going to prison for trying to take it back. "I think we are done here, Detective," I said, turning to leave. "I am ready to file my formal witness statement now." I stopped at the door with my hand on the metal handle. The room was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and fear, but I was not finished. I turned back to face them one last time, because justice is not just about stopping the crime in progress. It is about exposing the rot at the root. "Detective Miller," I said, reaching into my bag for the second file. "Before you book Mr. Brooks for charity fraud, you might want to see this. It pertains to a separate federal investigation regarding money laundering and illegal gambling rings in Chicago." Brad went rigid. His eyes bulged out of his head, looking like they were about to burst. "Stop it, Keisha," he begged, his voice cracking into a desperate squeak. "Please do not do this. We are family." I ignored him, walking back to the table. I laid out a series of spreadsheets that were color-coded and damning. For the past 2 years, Brad has been funneling money through a shell company called Kincaid Consulting, I explained, pointing to the highlighted rows. He claims these are consulting fees for real estate deals. But if you cross-reference these deposits with the Chicago Police Department's database on organized crime, you will see that Kincaid Consulting is a front for an illegal sports betting syndicate. Detective Miller leaned in, his interest piqued. He ran a finger down the column of numbers. "Brad owes them $200,000, I continued. "That is why he was so desperate for the trust fund today. He wasn't trying to build a healing center. He was trying to buy his life back from loan sharks who promised to start removing his fingers tomorrow morning if he didn't pay up." Tasha gasped, turning to look at her husband with horror. "You told me it was for investment capital," she screamed, hitting him on the shoulder with her purse. "You told me we were leveraging debt to build wealth. You gambled it all away." Brad shrank away from her, but I wasn't done with Tasha yet. I looked at my parents. Otis and Lucille sat huddled in the corner, trying to make themselves invisible. They looked at Tasha with pity, clearly thinking she was just another victim of Brad's lies. "Mom. Dad," I said, softening my voice just enough to make the next blow fatal. "You need to look at this too." I pulled out the property deed I had downloaded from the Cook County Clerk's office. My father frowned, adjusting his glasses. "What is this?" "This is the deed to our condo." "Why do you have this?" "Because you do not own it anymore, Dad," I said. He laughed, a nervous, dry sound. "Of course we own it. We have lived there for 30 years. We paid off the mortgage a decade ago. It is our nest egg." "Not anymore," I said. 6 months ago, a home equity line of credit was taken out against your property for its full value of $300,000. The documents claim you signed for it in person. But I know you were in Florida visiting Aunt Clara that week." I slid the signature page toward him. "Look at the signature, Dad. Look at the loop on the L. Who writes like that?" Otis looked. He squinted. Then his face went gray. He knew that handwriting. He had seen it on birthday cards and report cards for 30 years. He looked up at Tasha. Tasha went pale. She stopped hitting Brad and froze. "You stole our house," my father whispered. His voice was so quiet it was terrifying. "You forged our names and you stole our home." Tasha scrambled for an excuse. "It was a bridge loan, Daddy," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to pay it back with the trust fund money. I just needed to maintain appearances. I needed new clothes for my channel. You have to spend money to make money, right?" My mother let out a sound that wasn't a word, just a raw, guttural noise of heartbreak. "We are homeless," my father said, his voice trembling. "We have nothing. You spent our retirement on handbags." Suddenly Otis clutched his chest. His face turned a shade of purple that was alarming. He tried to stand up to confront Tasha, but his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the linoleum floor with a heavy thud, taking a metal chair down with him. "Otis!" My mother screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Help him! Someone help him!" Chaos erupted. Detective Miller shouted for a medic. Officers rushed in from the hallway. But amidst the noise and the panic, I stood still. I watched as the reality of their golden child's betrayal finally hit them harder than any heart attack could. Detective Miller turned to Brad, who was trying to shrink into his chair. "Bradley Brooks, you are under arrest for wire fraud, charity embezzlement, and money laundering," he barked, pulling Brad up by his arm. Brad began to weep openly. "You cannot put me in jail," he sobbed. "If I go to jail, I cannot pay them. Vinny has guys on the inside. They will kill me. You are signing my death warrant." "That is out of my hands now," Miller said, snapping the handcuffs tight. As the medics wheeled my father out on a stretcher, with my weeping mother chasing after them, and as Brad was dragged away, kicking and screaming about mob hits, I looked at Tasha. She was sitting alone at the table, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, with no husband, no parents, and no money. She looked at me, her eyes full of hate. "I hope you are happy," she spat. I picked up my portfolio and zipped it shut. "I am not happy, Tasha," I said honestly, "but I am finished." I turned and walked out of the station, leaving the wreckage of my family behind me. I had walked in a victim, but I was walking out a survivor. The interrogation room was suddenly quiet except for the sound of Tasha's ragged breathing. Brad was gone, having been dragged down the hall to booking. My father was gone, having been rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. My mother had chased after him, leaving Tasha alone at the metal table. She looked small and vicious, like a cornered rat that knew it had no escape route left. She glared at me with red, swollen eyes, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "You are sick, Keisha," she hissed, her voice trembling with hatred. "You destroyed this family. You sent your own husband to jail. You gave your father a heart attack. And for what? Just to keep the money for yourself. I hope you enjoy counting your millions while we are all suffering. At least the government froze the account so you cannot touch it either. If I cannot have it, nobody can." I looked at her with a calmness that seemed to infuriate her even more. I slowly zipped up my bag and leaned against the doorframe. "You really do not get it, do you, Tasha?" I said softly. "You think this was about greed. You think I wanted to hoard Leo's inheritance. You still think there is money in that account waiting to be seized." Tasha frowned, confusion flickering behind her anger. "What are you talking about? The bank manager said the account was frozen. He said the funds were there." I shook my head. "The bank manager said the account was flagged for fraud. He saw a pending transfer and stopped it. But he did not see the amount, Tasha. You never asked to see the amount." I walked back to the table and pulled out one final piece of paper. It was a transaction receipt from Friday night. "Leo's father was a brilliant man," I said, placing the paper in front of her. "He knew this family. He knew that if anything ever happened to him or to Leo, you people would come circling like vultures. So when he set up the trust fund, he included a fail-safe clause. It is called the bad guardian provision." Tasha stared at the paper, but she was not reading it yet. She was looking at me, paralyzed by the tone of my voice. "The clause states that if any family member attempts to access the principal funds for personal gain, or if they demonstrate a lack of moral character regarding the beneficiaries' well-being, the trust is automatically dissolved," I explained. I tapped the table with my finger. "Remember what you said in the conference room, Tasha. You said Leo's death was a release. You said he was a burden. You said you were glad he was gone so you could get paid." Tasha went pale. "You recorded that." "I did," I confirmed, "and that recording was the legal trigger for the bad guardian clause. The moment you said those words, you forfeited any claim to the money. The trust executed its secondary protocol immediately." I pointed to the receipt on the table. "Look at the date, Tasha. Look at the beneficiary." She looked down. Her eyes scanned the lines. I saw her pupils dilate. Date Thursday. Amount $4,500,000. Beneficiary National Heart Institute Pediatric Surgery Wing. But she stammered, looking up at me wild-eyed. But you transferred it to me on Friday. I saw the confirmation. Brad saw it. I smiled a sad, tired smile. On Friday, I initiated a second transfer to your new charity account, I said. But since the account was already empty, I had to transfer cash from my own personal checking account to make it look real. I leaned in closer so she could hear every word. I transferred $100, Tasha. The room seemed to spin around her. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. $100, she whispered. Yes, I said. When you and Brad walked into that bank this morning, you were not trying to withdraw millions. You were trying to withdraw a single Benjamin Franklin note. But because you signed that liability waiver, accepting responsibility for the funds, and because you tried to use charity money for a luxury car, you still committed felony fraud. You sold your soul. You betrayed your sister. You destroyed your parents' retirement, and you did it all for $100. Tasha let out a sound that was not human. It was a high-pitched keen of absolute despair. She grabbed the paper and ripped it in half, throwing the pieces at me. You are lying, she screamed, clawing at her own hair. That is not true. We are rich. We are supposed to be rich. The money is safe, Tasha. I said, my voice hard as stone. It is already at the hospital. They are naming a new surgical wing after Leo next month. His legacy is going to save thousands of children. Children who actually deserve a chance at life. Unlike you. Tasha collapsed onto the table, sobbing uncontrollably. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had nothing. No money, no husband, no house. And now she was facing prison time for a crime that did not even pay out. She had been outsmarted, outplayed, and utterly defeated. I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing but a distant pity. She was the architect of her own destruction. I had just handed her the bricks. Goodbye, Tasha, I said, turning my back on her for the last time. I hope the $100 was worth it. I walked out of the interrogation room and closed the heavy steel door behind me, muffling her screams. I walked through the busy police station, past the booking desk, where Brad was being fingerprinted, past the entrance where the ambulance had taken my father. I walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight and took the first deep breath I had taken since Leo died. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. It tasted like freedom. The court of public opinion is brutal, but it is also swift. For weeks, Tasha had controlled the narrative, using her army of bots and her crocodile tears to paint me as a villain. But she forgot the golden rule of the internet, which is that receipts never lie. That evening, I sat in my living room and did what I should have done from the beginning. I opened my laptop and logged into my own humble YouTube channel. I did not use filters. I did not use sad music. I simply uploaded the raw, unedited files. I titled the video "The Real Price of Greed." I uploaded the audio recording from the conference room where Tasha admitted that Leo's death was a release. I uploaded the foreclosure documents showing how she stole our parents' home. I uploaded the invoice from the click farm she used to harass me. And finally, I uploaded the security footage from the bank, showing Brad attacking a security guard over money that was meant for dying children. I pressed publish and watched the world burn. Within an hour, Tasha's carefully curated empire crumbled into dust. The sponsor she bragged about dropped her publicly. Her follower count plummeted by the hundreds of thousands. The comments section, which had been a weapon against me, suddenly turned on her with a ferocity that was terrifying to behold. She was not just cancelled, she was erased. The fallout in the real world was even faster. Because Tasha had admitted to the fraud during the police interrogation, the bank moved immediately to protect its assets. They foreclosed on my parents' condo the very next morning. My father was discharged from the hospital, only to find a padlock on his front door and an eviction notice taped to the glass. The home they had spent 30 years building, the nest egg they were so proud of, was gone. It had been swallowed whole by their daughter's vanity. Brad did not make bail. Given his ties to organized crime and the flight risk he posed, the judge denied his request. He traded his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit. He is currently awaiting trial for federal wire fraud and money laundering, facing a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. The loan sharks he feared are no longer his biggest problem. And Tasha, my glamorous sister who thought she was too good for regular work, found herself facing a reality check that was long overdue. With her assets frozen and her reputation destroyed, she had to find a way to pay for a lawyer. Last I heard, she is working double shifts at a truck stop diner on the outskirts of the city. She spends her days serving coffee to men who do not care about her follower count, wearing a uniform that smells like grease instead of designer perfume. I thought I would feel guilty seeing them fall this hard, but I realized that I did not push them. I just stepped out of the way and let gravity take its course. 3 days after the eviction, my phone rang late at night. The caller ID was blocked, but I answered it. Keisha. It was my mother, Lucille. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was small, broken, and trembling. Keisha, please, she sobbed. We are at a Motel 6 on the highway. Your father is sick. We have nowhere to go. The credit cards are maxed out. Please, honey. Just for tonight. Let us come sleep in the guest room. We are your family. We are so sorry. Just one night. I listened to her beg. I listened to the woman who threw wine in my face. I listened to the woman who stood by while her daughter called my son a burden. I closed my eyes, and for a second I remembered the mother she used to be before the money and the greed took over. But then I looked at the legal document framed on my wall. The restraining order. The one they signed voluntarily to get a payout that never existed. I am sorry, Lucille. I said, my voice steady and clear. But I cannot do that. Keisha, please, she wailed. We are on the street. You signed a contract, I said, citing the terms from memory. You agreed to a voluntary restraining order banning you from coming within 50 miles of my residence. If you come here, you are in violation of a court order. But we are your parents, she cried. And Leo was my son, I replied. You made your choice. The contract is binding. If you show up at my door, I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Do not call this number again. I ended the call. I blocked the number. I looked out the window at the empty driveway. It was finally over. The silence in the house was not lonely anymore. It was peaceful. Dui day la fan kui kung ku kit ban fan huenti. Duk vit chi tit bang ting an dam bao do zai kam suk va van fung fu hup, diduk voice AI. It has been exactly 365 days since I stood in the mud at that cemetery and watched my family celebrate their vacation while I buried my son alone. Today the sky over Atlanta is not gray and weeping. It is a brilliant, piercing blue. I am standing in front of the newly constructed West Wing of the National Heart Institute. The building is beautiful, made of gleaming glass and steel, reflecting the sunlight like a beacon of hope. Above the automatic doors in large silver letters that will never tarnish are the words, "The Leo Brooks Brave Heart Wing." I smoothed the skirt of my white dress. I am not wearing black today. I am done mourning. Today is about life. Beside me stands the chief of surgery and a little boy named Marcus. Marcus is 7 years old. He has the same mischievous smile Leo used to have. 2 weeks ago, Marcus became the first recipient of a fully funded heart valve transplant, paid for entirely by the trust fund my family tried to steal. He is alive because I protected that money. He is alive because I signed that document with a red pen. The crowd in front of us is large. There are doctors, nurses, donors, and parents of children who have been given a second chance. The air is filled with applause and the flash of cameras. But as I take the large ceremonial scissors in my hand, ready to cut the red ribbon, something catches my eye. I look past the cheering crowd, past the news cameras, and toward the iron gates at the very edge of the hospital grounds. There are 3 figures standing there. They are far away, but I would know them anywhere. They are standing outside the security perimeter, clinging to the bars, like prisoners looking at a world they can no longer touch. My father Otis is leaning heavily on a cane. He looks frail. The arrogance that used to puff out his chest is gone, replaced by a stoop of defeat. He is wearing a jacket that looks 2 sizes too big for him, likely bought from a thrift store. My mother Lucille stands beside him. She is not wearing her signature pearls or her designer sunglasses. Her hair is gray and unkempt, pulled back in a messy bun. She looks old. She looks tired. And then there is Tasha. Even from this distance I can see the change. The golden child has lost her shine. She is wearing a faded waitress uniform, likely on her break from the diner down the highway. Her posture is slumped. She is holding up her phone, trying to record the ceremony, zooming in on the life she threw away. They are looking at me. I can feel their gaze across the parking lot. It is a hungry, desperate look. It is the look of people who have realized too late that they bet on the wrong horse. They are looking at the clean lines of the hospital wing. They are looking at the reporters interviewing me. They are looking at the legacy they wanted to liquidate for a beach house and a Range Rover. For a moment our eyes meet across the distance. In the past, this would have been the moment my mother would have waved or tried to shout something to manipulate me. Tasha would have tried to make a scene. But today, they do not move. They know the rules. They know that the restraining order is still in effect, and that the security guards patrolling the perimeter know their faces. They know that if they take one step closer, they will go to jail. I look at them and I wait for the anger to rise. I wait for the pain of their betrayal to twist in my gut. But it does not come. I feel nothing. No anger, no sadness, no guilt. It is as if I am looking at strangers. They are just shadows flickering on the edge of my peripheral vision, ghosts from a chapter of my life that I have finished reading. I turn back to Marcus. He is looking up at me, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are you ready, Keisha?" he asks. I smile at him. "I am ready, Marcus." I bring the scissors down. The red ribbon snaps with a satisfying crisp sound. The crowd erupts into cheers. The doors slide open, welcoming the future. I do not look back at the gate. I do not need to. They are where they belong in the past. They wanted to sell my son's memory for a quick payout. They wanted to trade his dignity for their vanity. But in the end, they lost everything. And Leo, my sweet boy, became a legend. He became a savior. He became immortal. As I walk into the cool lobby of the hospital surrounded by the sound of hope, I realize that this is what freedom feels like. It is not just about having money or winning a lawsuit. It is about standing in your truth and letting the toxicity fall away until you are light enough to fly. They are just ghosts now, fading into the background while I walk forward into the light. If you have ever had to fight to protect the legacy of someone you love, or if you have ever had to cut off toxic family to find your own peace, I hope my story gave you strength. You are not alone, and you are stronger than they will ever give you credit for. If you support how I handled this, and if you are glad Leo's money went to saving kids like Marcus, please hit that like button and leave a heart in the comments for my brave boy. Thank you for listening. This journey taught me that family is defined by loyalty and love, not merely by biology. For years I believed that enduring their toxicity was a duty, but I learned that true peace requires the courage to sever the ties that strangle you. By standing firm to protect Leo's legacy, I didn't just save his inheritance. I reclaimed my own dignity. I transformed their selfish greed into a lifeline for innocent children, proving that love is infinitely more powerful than avarice. The greatest victory wasn't witnessing their downfall. It was the realization that I am whole without their validation. If this story inspired you to stand your ground against those who hurt you, please hit that like button and share this with someone who needs strength today.